All right. The October 17th, 2019 meeting of the Board of Harbor Commissioners will now come to order. Jeanette, will you please do the roll call?
Yes, John Stedman.
Here.
Betsy Kramer.
Here.
Bill Spicer.
Here.
Shoham Yaniv.
Here.
We have 3 commissioners absent tonight: Lang Sly, Merritt McRae, and Jim Sloan.
Thank you very much. And Carl, are there any changes to the agenda?
No changes this evening.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll now take public comment from Mr. Christopher Voss.
Chair Stedman, Commissioners, my name is Christopher Voss, and I'm here on behalf of the Commercial Fishermen of Santa Barbara. And I'd like to start by thanking the Harbor Department for pulling off an exceptional Harbor Festival. That Jeanette in particular did a great job filling in for me. I had to go to San Diego for my 40th high school reunion, and so for the first time in quite a few years I wasn't able to participate, but I heard that it went off in stellar fashion, and there were a great number of people there, and everyone had an excellent experience. So I want to extend my special thanks to you, Jeanette, for helping out. In addition, I'd like to also thank the Harbor Department for, it's actually agenda item 5. It has to do with the ice house. The fishing community is super appreciative of the allocation that's been set aside to recondition, I guess, or how do we characterize it? Retool or replace. We're going to replace the ice house. It's a critical piece of infrastructure for the fishing community as well as the community at large, because everybody benefits from that incredible resource for our community. So I want to thank everybody involved in that project, and Carl in particular, and Brian too, for putting that as a priority for the Harbor Department's budget. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Voss. Commissioners? All right. Let's move on to the approval of the minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes for the meeting of September 19th?
I'll second.
Very well.
And I'd like to make a comment on them. Emily is not here, but I'd like her to know that they were really good. And it's particularly helpful to have a description of what the people say and how they describe things so that we can refer to it back later. So.
Excellent. So all in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Say
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All righty. Let's move on to the department update. Carl, Director's report. Very well.
Oh, I'll read the recommendation.
Yes, please.
Item 2, Waterfront Director Recruitment. Recommendation that the Harbor Commission designate 2 commissioners to participate on a Waterfront Director interview panel.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. I'm Paul Casey. I'm City Administrator. I'm happy to be back in front of you giving you a status report on the Waterfront Director recruitment and to ask your consideration to having a couple of you spend a full day interviewing applicants. It's a long day, but I think it's an interesting opportunity and would really encourage and hope that a couple of you would be able to participate in that. So as you know, we have a vacancy for Waterfront Director. Both Mr. Bossi and Mr. Triberg are filling in their acting capacities. I'm using them both, and that's going well in my mind. The recruitment is open. It opened on September 26th, and so the flyer is out. We have it open for a full month, and so it will close on, let me get the date right, October 28th, and so encourage people to apply. We then go through an initial screening and evaluate the applications and determine who are kind of the top candidates that we would like to invite for a panel interview. The panel will consist of department heads. We'll try to find some other harbor directors or someone familiar and knowledgeable as a professional in the industry, and then I'd like a couple commissioners from you as well. Oftentimes, it will be 6 to 8 candidates. It takes a full day, so it is a commitment of time, so please consider that before raising your hand to do that. Tentatively, we are looking at December 2nd for those interviews. I believe that's a Monday. With the holidays and Thanksgiving, we just decided to do it immediately after those holidays. And so it's Monday, December 2nd right now. So happy to answer any questions, but really looking to have 2 of you appointed. I think Ms. Kramer participated in the last time we did it and enjoyed it.
I did. So did Jim Sloan.
Exactly, correct. And so appreciate that. Looking for 2 of you. You may want to do 2 and an alternate, just because sometimes something happens and then we're able to go to the alternate to kind of fill that need as well. So that just might be a suggestion. I think your absent committee members certainly should be considered. So I don't think you should consider their absence as disqualifying them from participating in this all-day event. I don't know if any of them expressed any interest in serving on the panel or not.
Yes, we've had some input on that.
Good.
So Jim Sloan, who is not here this evening, corresponded with us and the Waterfront Department about his qualifications. So I'm going to nominate him as one person that you'll need on Monday, December 2nd. I'm going to nominate myself as the other person. And then I'm going to select 2 alternates who are going to self-nominate. So you're going to have a total of 4, just in case we have anyone drop out of the process. Okay? Does that sound reasonable to everybody here? All right. Well, I'd like to nominate Bill Spicer and Shoham Yaniv as the alternates. Does anybody want to, do we need to actually do a motion for this?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think that would be appropriate to formalize that through a motion.
All right, so let me make a motion to appoint myself and Jim Sloan as the primary committee members for your process, Mr. Casey, and Bill Spicer, unless there's any objection, and Shoham Yaniv as alternates. Okay, do we have a second?
I accept as well.
Okay. Do we have a second for the motion?
I second that motion.
All right, very well. There you go. You have an overstock now. So let's, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. There you go. It's
Good.
unanimous. It's unanimous.
Thank you very much. So we will be in touch as we get closer and firm up the date. But for now, please pencil in December 2nd.
Very well.
Good.
Thank you.
All right. Now we can move on to the director's report. Carl?
Good evening, Chair Stedman and Commissioners. Council actions, as you may know, Brian and his staff worked hard on Title 17 ordinance revisions to our parking regulations. He went to the Ordinance Committee first with some minor comments on the dimensions related to these revised regulations, and then went to Council on October 8th. Fortunately, the Council approved the staff's recommendations and had a second reading yesterday, as a matter of fact. So these revisions will go forward and go into effect at the beginning of the year. Brian and his staff did an excellent job. It was a lively discussion at Council and kind of a hot topic for the waterfront. So this is something that's been in the books for a long time, and it's nice that we took care of it. And I'd like to thank Chair Stedman and Commissioner McCray for coming and providing some testimony at Council as well. As you know, Mick Kronsman recently retired, and that left the Harbor Operations Manager position vacant. Recruitment for a full-time replacement will be postponed until the permanent waterfront director is named. The next waterfront director would then be part of the Harbor Operations recruitment process and have a say in the composition of the management team. Based on the timing discussed above, the recruitment process for a permanent Harbor Operations Manager would likely take place in the early part of 2020. As Mr. Casey mentioned, he'll start interviews in December for the director position, and I would imagine either the end of December or beginning of the new year, he'd appoint a director, and then that individual would proceed probably with a recruitment, full-time recruitment. But understanding the importance of the Harbor Operations Manager position, Brian and I discussed this and decided to appoint Eric Engebretson as the Acting Harbor Operations Manager. You all know Eric is our current Harbor Patrol Supervisor. Eric is going to wear both hats. He's still in demand in both positions. Eric's been with the department for 30 years. He's got a wealth of knowledge and experience, and it's really going to help him, and we really thank him in advance for helping us out on the management team. We've got a few items tentatively scheduled for November. The first is Waterfront Department lease guidelines. Commissioner Lang Sly had asked for an update on that. Brian and I are working together, and we'll hopefully have an update on a dive boat conception memorial in that process. And we might be taking a look at the East of Wharf mooring program. There's been some changes in that program lately, so hopefully we'll be able to take a look at that and maybe bring something to the commission in November. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I just wanted to commend you for asking Eric to take the spot. We know Mr. Cromland's shoes are big to fill, but I think we have a perfect person to take that spot. So.
Agreed.
Sean? And I'd like to add an accolade to your comments about the Title 17 modifications. And last week's City Council meeting did an excellent job, Brian. That was a real Herculean effort in handling the last series of questions from Councilman Dominguez. I thought was pretty adept on your part. So when he was, I thought he was tricky with an SAT question for you. So excellent job. That was a lot of work.
I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing some changes in the harbor parking lot when it does take effect, and seeing the vehicles not there. And yeah, so thank you.
Okay, excellent. Now we'll move on to business services with Mr. Bossi.
Good evening, Commissioners. I have a short business services report this month, and every now and again we try to give you insights as to our operations down at the waterfront. And this came about, I believe it was you, Chair Stedman, as we move forward with the parking modifications. Some questions came up about our relationship with Santa Barbara City College. So I wanted to give you a little background on that. So the City of Santa Barbara and the Santa Barbara City, what's it called? City College District, otherwise known as the district, do have an agreement in place. And it was done way back in 1938. So this is an agreement that dates back over 80 years, and it's between the city and the district, and it's a joint use agreement. Now, the purpose of the agreement is to maximize use of limited resources on both sides of the table, and to cooperate and collaborate on the development and joint use of the facilities. Now, going back to 1938, we didn't have a lot of parking lots, but they were sketched out. They kind of knew where they were going. So this is a big document that goes back many years. The current agreement was amended in 2015, and up to that point, I believe there were 11 amendments over that time frame. The latest one, again, was in 2015, and what this did was a lot of cleanup, basically. It was a huge effort by City Parks and Rec, which led the process on the city side, and then obviously the district was very involved too. It established a formal joint use committee with representatives from both City College as well as the city. And then it clarified ownership and management of city and district facilities. It consolidated a number of separate agreements into the joint use agreement, and it also established the agreement term. Now, this is a little hard to see, but when we talk about clarifying responsibilities and management of who owns what, the red areas are Santa Barbara City College, so this is their west campus. This is the majority of the main campus. The blue areas are city property. So here's the harbor, and you can see all along the coast there. The yellow hatched area are city properties that are managed by City College, and that includes La Playa Stadium and the La Playa parking lots. It also includes an area over here in Pershing Park. This if I can see correctly, is over by the tennis courts and a couple of other hodgepodge parcels. In green, that is under the ownership of the Old Spanish Days folks. So right in the middle of the ball field, you'll see this swath of property owned by Old Spanish Days, and then over here is their carriage museum. So you got a lot going on here and a lot of different uses taking place. And so this latest agreement did clarify who was doing what. It solidified it much better as far as maintenance concerns. As far as joint use of facilities and how we maximize that, how both sides maximize that, on the left you have Los Baños, city property, but it's also used very heavily by Santa Barbara City College for everything from dive instruction to swim instruction. On the right, this is Pershing Park and the various ball fields, as well as tennis courts, and those are used by both, these are city facilities, but they're used by Santa Barbara City College, obviously, as well as for city rec leagues. I should also let you know that this encompasses things like their gymnasium, where the city has programs, their adult basketball leagues and adult volleyball leagues use the gymnasium at Santa Barbara City College. So, and it goes down to even such things as vans. We share vans. They'll transport their teams, and when they're not, parks will use them to work with kids and things like that. So it's a lot of different uses. All the volleyball courts along the coast are also used by both sides. Those are obviously city properties, but Santa Barbara City College uses those as well. The main area where it impacts the waterfront department is through parking lots. So our Ledbetter and Harbor West lots are, again, city property, but the district students, faculty, and staff are allowed to use Ledbetter and Harbor West parking lots Monday through Friday while school is in session. City College parking permits are accepted in both of those parking lots. And Santa Barbara City College parking permits are not valid on weekends or when school is not in session. So they can park there Monday through Friday with their City College parking permit. Saturday and Sunday, they would have to pay and display. Moving across the street, the LaPlaya East and West lots. Again, these are city parking lots, but the district has sole use and possession of the LaPlaya parking lots. They are responsible for the maintenance, operation, and control of those parking lots. And from Memorial Day to Labor Day, the collected revenue on the weekends and weekdays when school is not in session, so here we're talking summer school, so when summer school is not in session and on the weekends, City College collects the revenue and then brings that over to the city on that following Monday. I should let you know that when school is not in session over the summer, it usually generates between the two lots about $15,000 a year in additional revenue for us. They also do pay a small fee for the use of our lots during the semester and another fee in the in-between times. So again, this is a joint use agreement. It's been in place for over 80 years. It's been amended over 10 times. Again, the most recently was in 2015. And the whole purpose is to coordinate our activities and share very limited resources between the two entities. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
I have a question. How did the two parties come up with the $2,200 per semester?
So again, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Yaniv, that's grown over time, and so it's increased annually through the Consumer Price Index. So right now it stands at $2,200. We would sure like it to be a whole lot higher. But in negotiations, what happens, we've brought this up, we bring this up every time, but we are a small part of a much bigger puzzle. This is approved by City Council and their district board. When we propose to increase that, being an enterprise fund, City College then says, well, we're going to have to, if you increase our cost, we're going to have to push that cost off onto Parks and Rec or onto Public Works, which are not enterprise funds, and so that would come from the general fund. So we're kind of at this point where we kind of just have to take our 2,200, which is, we'll take it, obviously. Of course, we'd like to have more, and of course, we'll bring that up in the next negotiation process, and maybe there's a way to do that, but that's been the case throughout the past amendments, is that if we want to increase it, they're just going to take that cost and push it off on the city on some other department. So being an enterprise fund, we kind of take the hit on that one for the city. I should let you know that I believe it's between the third Monday in August. Again, this is getting into the weeds. The third Monday of August and the Friday, I believe, before Labor Day. That's kind of a void, and so we are allowed to charge them a daily parking rate, which ends up being over $700 a day. So this year they used it for 5 days, and it was about a little over $3,500 in revenue. So you can see that's large amount of money for just a week versus $2,200 for a semester. So it's not the best deal, but taking in the big picture and how we share resources, it all seems to work out.
How many students use the lots? Do you have any idea from them, how many permits they sell?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Kramer, I don't know how many permits they sell. I know it's part of your registration process.
Right.
When you are a student. I'm not sure if that's unit-based or not, that after a certain amount of units, then you have to buy a City College parking permit. I should also let you know that their permit is it's limited in what they can charge, and that goes back to the state charter. So that's part of state law. So we do participate in a group along with City College. City College actually puts together, it's called the Transportation Alternatives Group, realizing that parking is in short supply. We've been working on this with this group for the past 3 or 4 years. It's a combination of city folks as well as City College people who are looking at opportunities to increase rideshare activity, carpooling, and things like that, so they would not have to have so many permits, parking permits go out. You can see if you've been on campus over the last couple of years, a number of bike share facilities, some bike repair, staffed bike repair, kiosks, and things like that. That was all a result of this group. So they really are trying to reduce the amount of people going one person to a vehicle.
And what impact have you seen or have you heard on the waterfront parking lots in terms of people wanting to use the waterfront lots for the waterfront? I mean, I know that there's criticism, but is that reasonable, or what's the level of impact as far as you know?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Kramer, it's a considerable impact. It was brought up through our parking, the recent process we just went through with the changes to the municipal code regarding parking in the waterfront. But again, their permits are only good in Ledbetter and Harbor West. Right. So if people see them going into Harbor Main, they're going to pay the students because their permit is not valid there. The primary impact comes in about the first 4 to 6 weeks. Right. It gets pretty crazy. Then I believe there's an ad drop deadline, and it lightens up considerably. But those first 4 to 6 weeks are definitely intense, and then it kind of peters out through the year. City College also has a very light schedule on Fridays, so it's primarily just Monday through Friday, from about 10 to 2 or so.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
When is the next time that this will be revisited, or you guys will be reviewing the whole contract?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Yaniv, that will be next year in 2020. So it's a 5-year initial term with 5-year options after that, basically good until both parties call it.
Like March of 2020? March of 2020?
I'm not sure exactly when in March was the 1938 date. I'm not sure if I recall correctly, it was more like December of 2015 this got approved by City Council. So it would probably be later in the year, but we do meet a couple times a year with that joint use committee. And so we'll be participating in that, and I will again bring up the parking fees.
Okay, excellent. Thanks a lot, Brian, for providing that information. I know there was a high level of curiosity among the commissioners about all that. All right, so I guess we'll move on to the facilities management report.
Okay. Worked. All right. Chair Stedman and Commissioners, the Ice House is located at the end of the city pier. It was built in the mid-1990s and has pretty much exceeded its useful life. It can produce 10 tons of ice per day. We average 6 to 7 tons per day, so it more or less meets the needs of the commercial fishing fleet when it's up and running. It's been a problem facility for quite some time, and we initiated a project to replace it a couple of years ago. The project, we have $600,000 in the 2020 capital improvement program that's been in there for several years now, and we recently put together a design team and looked at a couple different alternatives. The design team was, in some respects, necessary because I couldn't find an engineering firm that wanted to take this project on. I traveled to the Pacific Northwest, to the Pacific Expo, a commercial fishing expo, and met a bunch of engineers and a bunch of folks, and all their work is in Alaska, Washington, Canada, back east, the Northeast, and there's hardly anybody down here in Southern California that'll work on it. So we wound up having to put together a local team. So we have an architect, Don Ziemer, with KBZ Architects, a structural engineer named Jeff Haight, and a public works engineer named Carson Wallert, whose father was a longtime commercial fisherman, so we've got a little local connection. So it's great to have this team put together, and we're moving forward. I mentioned that we recently looked at a couple of different alternatives, and there's North Star is sort of the industry standard manufacturer of this ice-making equipment. They have these facilities all out throughout the Northwest, in Europe, Asia, Saudi Arabia. Interestingly enough, they have ice-making equipment on a dam on Lake Isabella that is used to cool the concrete. So they're all over the place, and they're a big company. They put together a couple of concepts for us, and to put this in perspective for you is you see in gray is the existing ice house. It's 2 stories high. The ice-making equipment is on the top. The bin is on the bottom, and you can see the white hose that it comes out. It comes out onto the deck or on the other side and directly into boats. One of the alternatives they looked at, their turnkey system, is 3 40-foot containers that are stacked on top of each other. And you can kind of see those superimposed in red there. The very top is where the ice-making equipment is. The middle section is where the ice actually goes, and the bottom is for storage. And if you put a roof on top, it kind of superimposed on the other one gives you some idea of the difference. We rejected this alternative for a couple of different reasons. Right out the gate, delivered, it's about $480,000, so that gobbles up a whole chunk of our $600,000 budget. Perhaps a bigger problem is that the level of design review and permitting would increase exponentially to change what we have right now. This area is subject to design review by the Architectural Board of Review. When you replace something in kind, the level of review is relatively low. If you replace something in kind, the level of review from the building department can be relatively low. When you start from scratch, you really kind of don't know what you're going to get. This project would also require a permit from the Coastal Commission. So considering all those things, we just thought we'd be taking on much more than we wanted to and probably exceed the budget. And at the end of the day, we might not get approved. I think design review boards and permitting agencies, they see there's an ice house that meets the needs, it fits that size, and may not be receptive to a larger ice house. So with that said, the design review team decided to go with a smaller project that would essentially just replace the equipment upstairs. The first step, since we committed to this kind of step, you can get equipment replaced for about $280,000, just the equipment itself, skid mounted. And that's really what we need to replace with some other improvements to the discharge system. But the first step was a conditional assessment. And fortunately, we just got that completed, and I got the results, I think it was on Monday. Fortunately, the structural engineer, Jeff Haight, found that the ice house is structurally sound. There's a few things that came up that we knew we needed to do. The siding is kind of rotting away, especially on the north side of the building, the shady side. The balcony is not code compliant, but that's sort of a minor thing. And it's likely that in order to get the old ice-making equipment out and install the new ice-making equipment, we'll have to remove a section of the second-story walls. So that's why we have a structural engineer looking at those things. It's pretty straightforward, we think, to move forward with a project like this. It's probably more achievable than eliminating the whole thing, rebuilding the end of the pier, and putting a new, larger ice machine on the wharf. So that's the top. That's the ice house in and of itself. We need to look at the entire structure. This is looking directly underneath the ice house from the fuel dock. There's a lot of wood going on, a lot going on down there. In general, all piers are constructed more or less the same. They have vertical piles. They have caps. There's stringers and deck boards. There's a concrete slab on the top, and the ice house is built on top of that. We have a dive crew that will, concurrent with the design efforts, will go ahead and inspect the piles, just like they do on Stearns Wharf. We are likely going to just proactively install fiberglass jackets over those piles. That's the way we treat all the wooden piles in our buildings on Stearns Wharf. We had our marine engineering firm, Moffett & Nichol, do an analysis several years ago and concluded that this method is suitable for maintaining the structural life of these elements. So we'll probably do that proactively, because you just can't drive new piles underneath the wharf, and it's very, very expensive to take the whole ice house down, drive new piles, rebuild the deck, and everything else. So we think that's the best way to proceed. There's 14 piles, so it's not too much to do. And then we'll also, let me go ahead and flash forward here. Replace the cross bracing that you saw and install those fiberglass jackets. This is all achievable. All that stuff can be done in-house. We already have most of the material and whatnot, so we kind of absorb that into our regular operating costs. The next step, we'll complete those inspections this month, and now that we have the conditional assessment completed, we'll move on with a conceptual design. So our architect and structural engineer will work together, probably with North Star, getting some calculations based on the new equipment for weight and some of the things that are required for submittal to the building department for a permit. We'll have our preliminary design review hopefully in December, so we'll kind of know that we're doing the right thing. It's a fairly complicated project. It's a very complicated project, actually, and we need to know from the planning department and the building department what exactly we need to look at. We think we know, and we think we've kind of preempted some of the major issues. So that's how we're proceeding at this time. An ultimate goal would be to have a bid package ready sometime in the early spring and put it out to bid and hopefully get this thing built within the fiscal year. I'll read my next one, that we can take any questions on either project, if you don't mind. So the C-Center solar panels. The Community Environmental Council administers the Solarize nonprofit program in partnership with Asteri Solar. They go to nonprofit organizations and they essentially try and promote solar panels to help offset the cost of their operations. Brian and I met with these folks quite a while ago, and they wanted to do solar panels here and at the Waterfront Center, the old Naval Reserve Center. And it's a great idea, and the city really promotes alternative energy, but we had some concerns about design review and whatnot. So we asked them to go to the Architectural Board of Review to have this taken a look at, and as well as the Coastal Commission, which they did, and got approvals from both. So the project has now proceeded. Here's our sponsors. The installation includes 160 solar panels that'll generate 57 kilowatts of electricity. That's about half of their electrical needs. They spend about $35,000 a year, I believe, in electricity. There's a lot of pumps associated with that facility, with all the touch tanks and everything that they have. So it's one of their larger operating costs. So this particular project is a good one, kind of meets the objectives of the C-Center itself and the city's objectives to promote alternative energy. The project just started. They've got some of the fasteners up, and we'll start seeing solar panels going up any day now. They may even have, they've got a few of them going up already. This is a pretty big change down at the waterfront, where we take the aesthetic and the architecture very seriously. You probably have never seen a large building covered with solar panels in the waterfront, so this will be the first one. It's a great project, and we're glad that they went through the design review process and are moving forward with it. And it'll be interesting to see how effective it is. And we'll see what follows after this particular project, whether or not more of these will be advanced down in our down in the waterfront area. That concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Carl. Pretty exciting about the ice house. I was concerned last year when you mentioned that there was nobody who wanted to touch it. So I just wanted to confirm what you said. So the current one, when it's working, is a 10-ton capacity, and we use 6 to 7 tons. And that was daily?
Yeah, Chair Stedman, Commissioner Spicer, that's correct. That's the capacity when it's running at full capacity.
Do we believe that that's capacity we need for our fleet? That's really the crux of my question.
Yeah, I would say so, because our records go back quite some time. And there's nothing that we're aware of on the horizon with respect to commercial fishing, that there's a new fishery that's going to open up in the next month or a couple of years that would really increase the demand. When the fishing's good and the weather's calm, we push the limits a little bit, but then there's lots of times when it's windy and rough and there's ice available.
Yes. Okay.
So we think it's suitable, and we haven't heard from the commercial fishing fleet that they want something bigger and better. And I think moving forward with what we have is just going to be easier for permitting, design, construction, and all of that.
Oh, I'm fully on board with that. I agree. So my compliments.
Thank you.
How long will the ice house be out of commission when it's being rebuilt?
Chair Stedman, Commissioner Yaniv, what we'll buy is a whole new ice-making system mounted on skids, prefabricated, 100% ready to go. What will take some time will be to deconstruct whatever part of the second floor we need to get the old ice-making equipment out and the new ice-making equipment in. We'll have to have a regular old construction firm that works on vertical structures. I would guess 30 days-ish for something like this. Hopefully not a whole lot longer. To get the old stuff out is going to be a little bit difficult, and to put the new stuff in will be frankly quite simple. It's the plumbing and the wiring that'll get a little complicated. And framing up around it, in a couple of days, a good construction crew could frame up 2 walls and put siding up. But I'm sure at the time we'll be talking about 30 days, hopefully not a lot longer than that.
Is there a plan in place for the fishermen to get ice during those 30 days?
We probably won't coordinate that effort. The ice house unfortunately breaks down on a somewhat regular basis, and when it does, it breaks for a week, 2 weeks at a time. Okay. There's ice in Oxnard. The fish market themselves and the fish processing plant, when they take fish down south, they'll take extra totes and fill them up down there.
Okay.
The commercial fishermen, they just go and buy bags of ice from Costco or try and work with the fish market to get a delivery coming up from Oxnard. Depending on how long it is, we might coordinate with them, since we're working pretty closely with them, to have some larger deliveries come up from Oxnard and dispense to the boats.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a question for you, Carl. The fiberglass pile jackets, how do they really compare to the conventional pilings in terms of their longevity?
Chair Stedman, I don't know that I know how long they last. The way they kind of work is the typical wooden pile in the mud lasts a long time. That's why you find old wooden ships when there's a hurricane and it scours out the sand. The wood's pretty solid. So that structural element is fine. What happens is, as the wooden piles deteriorate, they tend to hourglass or pencil. They get a little thinner. So what you wind up doing with a fiberglass jacket is you use the wood as a form, and you create essentially a fiberglass pile. You can buy fiberglass piles. They're hollow, they're fiberglass, and they're structurally sound. So that's essentially what you're doing, is using the wood as a form to build a fiberglass pile. We've had good luck with them. They're a little more rigid. Wood's it's sort of the ultimate building material. It's malleable, it's strong. Fiberglass is a little bit more rigid. We have dozens of them on Stearns Wharf, and we haven't lost any. We haven't noticed any excessive cracking or anything like that. So they seem to be much better than the ones that are there. The alternative, of course, is to demolish a building, drive new piles, and start all over. It's just so expensive. So we'd like to think that, another 20, 30 years at least was what we're looking for.
That's a great explanation. I really didn't understand that technology. Thank you, Carl.
Welcome.
All right. I guess there are no further questions. All right, so we're going to move on to our next report, Harbor Operations, from Acting Director or Manager Eric.
Good evening, Chair Stedman, Commissioners. There we go. Commercial lobster fishery is in full swing. This opening of the lobster season began Wednesday, October 2nd. The Waterfront Department provided a free staging area for commercial fishermen's lobster traps in the launch ramp from September 21st until October 4th. The fishermen have found this a valuable accommodation provided by the waterfront, and approximately 30 commercial fishermen take advantage of this designated lobster trap staging area. This particular fishery has undergone added regulatory guidelines, resulting in a reduced number of traps allowed to be set by individual commercial fishermen. Reducing the number of traps is more manageable for the fishermen and may be potentially benefit local stocks. I got ahead of myself. Lobster fishermen have seen a decline in the price per pound, which is half of what it was 2 years ago, partially as a result of tariffs. Despite the loss, both commercial fishermen and recreational divers have reported high volume catches and an indication of a healthy population and increased by the domestic market. The lobster season ends March 18th, 2020. And as you can see in this photo, there's quite a few lobsters. Harbor Watch meetings, they're coming up. They're biannual, and they're modeled after the Neighborhood Watch program in your neighborhood. The Harbor Watch meetings are a citizen-based group who work together to spot and report crime and hazards to public safety. Over time, this program has morphed into a general exchange of information between harbor users and Harbor Patrol, followed by more practical hands-on education and training. With the added hands-on approach, past attendees have been trained in CPR, first aid, fire extinguisher demonstrations, and firebox hose demonstrations. As you can see on the slide on the left, we have a section during May where we have flare demonstrations as well. And it's set up with the Coast Guard, and it's in a controlled environment. Evening Harbor Watch meetings are generally held twice a year in spring and fall, and they're advertised on the marina gates. Mark your calendars for the tentatively scheduled Harbor Watch meetings on Tuesday, November 19th, 2019, and Tuesday, May 19th, 2020, which also coincides with Safe Boating Week. And here we have Officer Hubbard, whose due diligence and planning the flare demonstrations. Oops, that did not work. Oh, can I go back? There it is. And no sound. But, that's a parachute flare. And the idea is for these folks to get a chance to try to light some of these flares off and get an idea of what it's like in a controlled environment, should they ever have to use them in an emergency. Next, the Parade of Lights, December 8th. 33rd Annual Parade of Lights is just around the corner. And on Sunday, December 8th, boats will decorate to the theme of Deep Space Holidays for the annual parade. Slip permittees will receive participation sign-up forms in their November billing statements. And other boaters are encouraged to participate and can pick up sign-up forms in the Harbor Master's office and online. And this is it for the evening. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, feel free.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is it at all possible to have the Harbor Watch signs posted along the harbor front area as well as the sea landing area?
Absolutely, yeah.
That'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
I have a question. First of all, good job, Eric.
Thank you.
Excellent. There were a lot of lobster traps staged out there whenever that started. I happened to be walking, and I've never seen so many lobster traps. I took pictures. Maybe this is old hat for everyone here. But how far out do those boats go for their catch?
As far as the Channel Islands, I know a lot of them fish the Channel Islands, and they used to be an unlimited number of traps a fisherman could have, commercial fishermen, and that's been reduced to 300. So it's still substantial.
Each fisherman
Correct.
can have 300 traps.
Yes, up to 300 traps.
Wow. It's a pretty amazing scale, I think. You guys don't seem surprised by this. I was very surprised. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But that also goes to show why there's a need for the commercial fishermen for their storage facility as well, because if so many if let's say hypothetically each fisherman has 300 traps, they all need a place to store them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. More flare videos, I think, are in order. That was good. All right. So we are
at item number 7, the underground fuel storage tank replacement. Recommendation that Harbor Commission receive an update on a proposed plan to replace 4 underground fuel storage tanks located in Harbor Way.
Chair Stedman and Commissioners, at the July 2019 Harbor Commission meeting, we reported on a public meeting with the tenants from the Harbor commercial area regarding the proposed underground storage tank replacement project. Santa Barbara Fuel Dock, Inc. is responsible for replacing all the underground storage tanks located in Harbor Way and have been working diligently on finalizing the replacement plan. Just as a reminder, the fuel dock is at the end of the city pier. The existing 4 tanks are at the end of what we call the 125 building. It's really kind of in the heart of the harbor commercial area. There are 4 10,000-gallon tanks existing, and recently Santa Barbara Fuel Dock revised their plans to replace those 4 10,000-gallon tanks with 2 20,000-gallon tanks. There's an exhaustive approval process. The Santa Barbara County Public Health Department Certified Unified Program Agency, CUPA, much easier to refer to them that way. They regulate businesses that operate above and below ground storage tanks to protect public health and the environment. There are also permits from the city involved with this as well. As I mentioned, they went from 4, they have 4, they originally planned to use 3 tanks and recently went to 2 tanks. This has created a little bit of a problem because it just takes more time to evaluate this. So they got about 90% through the approval process. Now they've had to take a step back. Last week they had to conduct take a soil sample for a geotechnical analysis for a wide variety of reasons, one of which is for recharge rates. This is, groundwater is very shallow there. They need to know how quickly it's going to flow into the pit where the tanks are to know how quickly to pump it out. And they also have some revised shoring plans associated with the tank configuration change, and that's based on the geotechnical analysis. So the soil sample's done. It's going to go back to the engineering firm to take a look at how the shoring should be done. So to give you kind of a cross-sectional view of what this looks like, this pit is going to be 15 feet deep. You can see the top is a concrete cap. The tanks sit down like that. They're anchored down, and they're actually just backfilled with gravel for the most part, and fill. And when they are put in the ground, this pit, if you can imagine a pit, I'll give you a little view of it. It's dewatered because water is constantly flowing into it. As the water flows in, they fill these tanks with water to kind of offset so they're not buoyant. If you just let them be in there and let the groundwater flow in, the buoyancy would be so high they'd pop up out of the ground. So the engineering analysis associated with that is somewhat complicated. Also, the shoring is somewhat complicated. These are right up against the 125 building. So we need to make absolute certain that the shoring is structurally sound so that nothing happens to the building. We surveyed the whole area, so we know what it looks like now, and when they're done, it needs to look the same, so we don't have any settling of any buildings or anything like that. Unfortunately, the plan revisions, the review and approval will delay the project by about 4 weeks, we think. That really pushes us towards the holiday season, so Santa Barbara Fuel Dock, Inc. wants to postpone construction until March 2020. I was going to tell you all about a sign plan that our staff had put together that was going to direct the public to all the businesses that have to remain open while this was going to happen. We've been coordinating with tenants who might want to do some remodeling at the time. We were going to start on Tuesday. So I was ramped up to tell you all about, we're about to start, this is what we're doing to let everybody know we're open for business, but I just found out, I confirmed on Monday afternoon that they're going to put it off till March. So we're going to put off public meetings until we make sure they get all the approvals first, and then we'll have a little time, take a deep breath, and then coordinate with the tenants once again, because it really will impact the tenants and business, and we want to do everything we can to make sure that the businesses thrive to the extent they can while this happens. This is essential for a working harbor. You need a fuel dock, you need a boatyard. These things, you just got to have these things. There will be fueling while this happens from trucks. Santa Barbara Fuel Dock has really been great to work with. They're really dedicated to make this happen. They've invested a lot of money. They have their funding. They have the tanks. The tanks are already built. So they've got to store all this stuff in the meantime. But they're very conscientious about impacts to the harbor commercial area tenants. So they felt it was in everybody's best interest to put this off and make sure we don't have a huge construction mess during the holiday season, which are usually quite lucrative for the local tenants. So I'll obviously be reporting back to you on this project, but that concludes my report for this evening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Carl. What do our constituents in the harbor view the postponement? Is it just what's their thoughts or your feelings?
Chair Stedman, Commissioner Spicer, I think in general they're kind of relieved. This was going to butt up against the holidays. You've got to pick some time of the year to do it. There's no way summer would ever work. The Harbor Seafood Festival obviously it's a hurdle we got to get over, but there's so many people there, it couldn't happen anywhere around that. Winter is logically the best time, except for the very middle of winter. As some of you have probably seen, and these guys have seen, every few years we get a really large swell that overtops the berm in front of the yacht club, and it flows into Harbor Way. Well, it fills Harbor Way with water. You couldn't possibly have an open, active construction site in a pit with fuel tanks in it during that. So we really need to get past those conditions before we can break ground. But we'll have a pretty long run in the spring when fishing's slow usually. It's pretty windy in the spring. And things are ramping up in the harbor commercial area. But like I had mentioned, we put a lot of time and effort into a sign plan and making sure that the public knows we're going to be open for business during construction.
Thank you, and I agree. We have to pick a time, and so be it. Thank you.
You're a very thorough engineer, Carl. I appreciate your reports, always. So did you mention yesterday that the businesses, the merchants that are near the 125 building and in that building, I guess, the business interruption insurance doesn't cover them for an event like this?
Chair Stedman, that's my understanding.
So they really have to have the timing and their contingency plan well organized.
Yeah, and in part of us reaching out to them is if they want to make improvements to their own facility, now's the time. And so the fish market is going to do that. That's their plan. They have a pretty comprehensive remodel that's going through the permit process right now. They weren't quite finished with it. So they were really the most relieved because they were going to have to snap into action right away, get a contractor on board, finish up with their permits, and they wanted to break ground kind of right away. The holiday season is lucrative for them. So I think we told them first, and they were quite pleased that we were putting it off. So we'll coordinate with all of them. You know, the Channel Islands Outfitters there. It's going to create kind of a unique situation where on the alley, that area, we're going to close it. There'll be no vehicles going through there, so we're going to make it as more pedestrian friendly, probably putting more tables out and make it more of a promenade kind of thing and see how that works. So, yeah.
Excellent. There are no further questions, right? Okay, so now I guess we'll move on to commission and staff communications. Are there any items, commissioners? Betsy, do you want to share any updates? Staff?
We have none this evening.
Okay, very well.
Excuse me, Chair Stedman, I just might want to point out one thing.
Yes.
We do have a sea level rise adaptation meeting next Tuesday,
No, it's been canceled.
the 24th?
Sorry, it's been canceled, and the message came out this morning from Crystal Vaughn saying that that meeting's canceled, and then she sent out a subsequent message saying that the next meeting will be November 19th, I believe.
Okay. Nevertheless, when they are scheduled, we'll try and report out at our Harbor Commission meeting so the public knows they are public meetings.
Right,
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry for the confusion.
yeah.
Oh, very well, thank you. All right, do we have a motion for adjournment?
A second?
Second, all in favor?
Aye.